Stop waiting for love from others and be your own miracle. Have you ever imagined stopping the search for validation and finally feeling complete? Stop waiting for love from others and start cultivating the most powerful love, self-love. It's time to connect with your true essence and be the transformation you've always sought. Don't wait any longer. The power is within you. Stop waiting for love from others and be your own miracle. Often, the search for love outside ourselves is linked to a deep-seated belief that something is missing. Perhaps, in moments of loneliness, we seek another person's love as if it were the answer to our feeling of emptiness. Jung said that, in truth, we unconsciously project onto others what we believe is lacking within us. This expectation that someone else will fill these internal gaps is the root of many frustrations. However, the truth is that this external search never provides us with true fulfillment. Completeness lies in recognizing that love must first be found within ourselves. When relationships start being seen as attempts to fill these voids, that's when problems arise. No matter how much external love brings us moments of happiness, it will never fully heal our internal wounds, as they belong to our psyche and need to be addressed in their own space. What happens is that many people get stuck in this cycle, waiting for someone else's love to be the remedy for their pain. The key to breaking this cycle is understanding that without self-awareness, someone else will never be able to fill our soul. Emotional dependency arises from being disconnected from our true self, the self. When we are disconnected from who we really are, we look to others for validation, making us vulnerable to unbalanced relationships. To break free from this dependency, it's necessary to go through a process of self-awareness where we can reestablish our connection with our center and understand that, to be whole, we don't need anyone's approval. Thus, we begin to walk towards true emotional independence, which is the foundation for any healthy relationship. Relationships function as mirrors that reflect what we often avoid seeing in ourselves. Jung described this projection as an unconscious mechanism that leads us to attribute to others qualities and flaws that actually belong to us. That's why certain attitudes from others irritate us so much, not because they are inherently bad, but because they resonate with something unresolved within us. A partner who is inattentive may be reflecting our own difficulty in giving ourselves attention. A friend who abandons us may be revealing the fear we have of being alone. Unbeknownst to us, we project our own desires and wounds, expecting the other to save us from ourselves. The problem is that this projection inevitably generates frustration. We create unrealistic expectations, hoping that the other will meet our emotional needs, but sooner or later, the illusion fades. When someone doesn't act as we would like, we feel betrayed without realizing that we place that responsibility on them. Relationships based on this dynamic tend to be unstable, as the other person will never be able to fill a void that can only be resolved internally. And when this frustration repeats in different relationships, we often conclude, mistakenly, that the problem always lies with others, without realizing that the pattern lies within us. Understanding this dynamic is the first step towards individuation. Instead of blaming others, we can use these reflections as opportunities for growth. If someone awakens anger in us, what does that say about us? If we feel jealousy, where does that insecurity come from? A good practice is to keep a self-awareness journal, noting patterns that repeat in relationships and seeking the root of these emotions. Thus, instead of being held captive by projection, we become the protagonists of our own development. And when this transformation begins, something curious happens. Relationships stop being sources of suffering and become instruments of evolution. Individuation, according to Jung, is the process of becoming whole by integrating all parts of the psyche, especially those we prefer to ignore. This means that to feel complete, we don't need to seek something outside ourselves. Instead, we need to bring to light everything that already exists within us. Often we spend our lives trying to fit in, molding our identity to be accepted, but this only distances us from who we truly are. True growth happens when we look inward and accept all our facets without fear of what we might find. Individuation is not about becoming someone new, it's about reconnecting with what has always been there, waiting to be recognized. When this process begins, the need for external validation starts to lose its power. If previously the love and approval of others were seen as essential for well-being, now they become secondary. After all, the greatest source of security comes from self-awareness. How many times have we felt lost because we tried to define ourselves through the eyes of others? When we truly know ourselves, we stop seeking answers in others as we learn to trust our own voice. This doesn't mean we stop caring about relationships, but rather that we stop depending on them to feel complete. Self-love emerges as a natural consequence of this path. It's not an empty affirmation or an attempt to convince ourselves of something, but an internal state built from a deep understanding of who we are. Those who know themselves don't need approval, as they understand their own value. And, ironically, it's precisely this that attracts healthier connections, because no one truly respects someone who doesn't respect themselves. Thus, self-love is not just a nice concept, but an essential pillar for an authentic life. And to strengthen this internal love, we must face what we often avoid: our own shadow. The shadow, a central concept in Jung's psychology, represents the hidden aspects of our psyche, those parts of ourselves that we prefer to ignore, repress, or deny. It is here that deep fears, insecurities, and unconscious beliefs reside, preventing us from fully loving ourselves. When we don't recognize these shadowy aspects, we end up projecting them onto the external world, seeking validation, or avoiding situations that force us to confront our wounds. Often, severe self-criticism, low self-esteem, and the feeling of not being good enough have roots in these unconscious contents. Thus, as long as we don't look at this part of ourselves, we remain trapped in a distorted view of who we are, unable to develop genuine internal love. If we don't work through our internal pains, we end up repeating destructive patterns without realizing it. This can manifest in toxic relationships, self-sabotage, and even difficulty setting healthy boundaries. Many times, we feel unworthy of love because we carry an unconscious narrative that reinforces this belief. For example, someone who grew up believing they need to strive to be loved may unconsciously attract relationships where they always feel insufficient. Thus, blocks to internal love don't arise out of nowhere. They are formed over a lifetime and need to be consciously reinterpreted so we can free ourselves from the cycles that bind us. Bringing the shadow to light is what allows us to break the psychological prison. When we accept that everyone has dark aspects, we stop fleeing from ourselves. This process is not comfortable, but it is transformative. Instead of fearing our imperfections, we learn to embrace them, understanding that they are part of our development. And the more we accept ourselves, the less we need external approval to feel whole. Freedom arises when we realize we don't need to be perfect to deserve love. We just need to be authentic. And authenticity is born when we are willing to face and integrate all parts of who we are. Jung described the archetype of the wounded healer as a representation of the healing power that arises from our own pain. This concept suggests that our deepest wounds not only shape who we are, but also carry the potential for transformation and wisdom. Often it is through suffering that we find paths to self-awareness and the expansion of consciousness. Those who have faced intense challenges know that by overcoming them, they gain a greater understanding of themselves and life. This happens because pain forces us to look inward, question limiting beliefs, and seek answers that we might otherwise never have sought. This process of confronting internal wounds is what awakens the internal healer, the part of us that has the ability to rebuild and find meaning even in the most difficult experiences. Emotional pain, when faced with consciousness, can become a portal to growth. Instead of being seen as something to be avoided or eliminated, it can serve as a teacher, imparting valuable lessons about our essence. Feelings like rejection, fear, and frustration usually reveal where we still need to heal. If we ignore or repress these emotions, they continue to manifest in our lives unconsciously, often leading us to repeat negative patterns. But when we choose to observe them honestly and without judgment, we begin to reinterpret our relationship with pain. Thus, what once seemed like an obstacle becomes a path to self-awareness and inner liberation. Taking responsibility for our own healing is the greatest act of self-love we can practice. Many people wait for healing to come from outside, another person, a change in circumstances, or a miraculous event. But true transformation occurs when we become aware that no one can save us except ourselves. This doesn't mean we have to do everything alone, but that the commitment to self-healing must come from within. This process requires patience, compassion, and courage to look at our shadows without fear. The more we cultivate this journey of internal healing, the more capable we become of offering love to ourselves and others genuinely. After all, it is only when we become whole that we can truly share this fullness with the world. Many people are trapped in patterns of self-sabotage because, deep down, they fear their own brilliance. Jung called this the fear of greatness, an unconscious resistance to fully realizing our potential. This idea may seem paradoxical, as everyone wants happiness and success. However, there is a part of the psyche that fears the changes that come with it. True transformation requires abandoning limiting beliefs, taking responsibility, and stepping out of our comfort zone, and we're not always ready for that. Therefore, often when we're about to take a big step towards growth, self-destructive thoughts emerge that make us retreat. This subtle fear of our own light can prevent us from recognizing our capabilities and fully accepting our own grandeur. Self-sabotage is often linked to the unconscious belief that we don't deserve love, happiness, or fulfillment. This mental programming can have deep roots originating in childhood, from experiences of rejection or from negative messages we internalized throughout life. If, on some level, we believe we're not good enough, we might end up creating obstacles to our own progress. This can manifest in various ways: procrastination, destructive relationship patterns, fear of exposure, or fear of taking risks. Even when we have clear opportunities for growth, we might find excuses not to pursue them, simply because a part of us still doesn't feel worthy of achieving what we desire. Breaking this cycle requires a profound process of recognizing our own value. We need to understand that our inner light doesn't need to be conquered. It's already within us. The challenge is to remove the blocks that prevent us from seeing it. This means replacing self-criticism with self-awareness and transforming the fear of change into an invitation for expansion. When we learn to trust our own brilliance, we stop hiding behind insecurity and begin to live authentically. Accepting our light is not an act of arrogance, but a commitment to the truth about who we really are. And the more we embrace this truth, the freer we become to live with fullness and purpose. The collective unconscious, according to Jung, is a universal repository of archetypes and shared experiences by humanity. These patterns are not just historical or cultural, but also energetic, influencing how we relate to love and the idea of completeness. In many societies, we are conditioned from an early age to believe that we need another person to feel whole, complete, as if our happiness depends on someone else. This belief is reinforced by movies, music, and even the way we socialize, creating a constant sense of lack, of something that needs to be filled. As we grow up in a society that highly values the search for idealized love, many end up projecting onto others the expectation that they will fulfill this lack. This mentality of scarcity leads to behaviors based on emotional dependency, as the collective unconscious teaches us to see others as the key to our happiness. And the more we internalize these archetypes of lack, the further we move away from our own power, our ability to heal and be whole without needing someone else to complete us. To break this cycle, it is essential to question these culturally inherited beliefs. The first step is to reconnect with the idea that we are whole beings in ourselves. We don't need external validation to feel worthy of love and happiness. By freeing ourselves from this mentality of emotional dependency, we can access a healthier view of relationships. Only then can we create truly balanced connections where love is shared fully without irrational demands or expectations. Our personal energy acts as an invisible magnet, shaping the type of love and connections we attract into our lives. According to Jung, our psyche directly influences the external reality, reflecting in the quality of relationships we cultivate. When we operate from a state of emotional scarcity, we project insecurity and a need for validation, which inevitably draws us into relational dynamics that reinforce this lack. The external world becomes a mirror of our internal vibration, reflecting back what we carry within us. If we vibrate with scarcity and fear of abandonment, we attract relationships that reinforce these emotions, as the unconscious seeks the familiarity of established patterns. Jung teaches us that everything we repress in the unconscious manifests in our external experiences. Thus, when we don't heal our internal wounds, we project our insecurities onto others, creating vicious cycles of emotional dependency. Self-love, then, is not just an abstract concept, but an energetic frequency that defines how we relate and how we allow others to treat us. On the other hand, when we cultivate high self-esteem and a deep sense of worthiness, we emit an energy that magnetizes more balanced and healthy connections. An integrated psyche doesn't seek to fill internal voids through others, but rather shares its fullness. In this state, there is no fear of being alone, as the relationship with oneself is already sufficient. Jung affirmed that individuation liberates us from the need for external validation, allowing relationships to be guided by authenticity and mutual growth. This energetic alignment transforms how we interact and how love flows into our lives. Synchronicity, a concept explored by Jung, reveals how significant events in our lives don't happen by chance. Everything is mysteriously interconnected, and when we align with our true selves, we begin to see that encounters, coincidences, and even challenges appear as a reflection of our internal journey. In the context of self-love, this means that as we become more authentic and connected to who we truly are, we start to attract situations and people that also vibrate at this level of truth. It's not a coincidence, it's the universe responding to our internal state. For example, imagine that you started working more on your self-esteem, practicing self-awareness, and valuing yourself more each day. Suddenly, you meet someone or encounter an opportunity that seems to arrive at the right time. This is synchronicity. What appears to be a simple coincidence is, in truth, a direct response to your internal alignment. The universe, in a mysterious way, brings what we are ready to receive, reflecting what we are inside. When we are at peace with ourselves, the world around us reflects this harmony. This phenomenon goes beyond coincidences, being a manifestation of what Jung called the union of the individual unconscious with the collective. When we are truly connected with our purpose and essence, it's no surprise that life begins to fit together more smoothly, and the opportunities and connections that arise seem perfect. This is the power of synchronicity. When we are centered and authentic, what appears in our lives is not by chance, but a manifestation of our journey of self-discovery. The concept of the self in Jungian psychology is one of the most important pillars for understanding the process of self-transformation. The self is not just a part of us, it is the totality of our psyche, the center of our being. It encompasses both the conscious and unconscious, unifying all aspects of who we are, including our shadows, desires, and unexplored potentials. Connecting with the self is accessing our deepest essence, the core of our identity, where love and peace reside naturally. When we achieve this connection, love ceases to be something we seek externally and becomes a natural internal state. Often we spend our lives seeking validation, something or someone to make us feel loved. However, when we tune into ourself, we understand that love is something that already resides within us, waiting only to be recognized and manifested. This is the true secret of transformation. Instead of seeking love from external sources, we begin to emanate that love from our own essence. It is no longer a search, but a spontaneous expression of who we are. Love becomes a consequence of our internal alignment, and thus life becomes an expression of this state of fullness. Living from the self is not just an act of transformation, it is a true miracle. It is in this state that we find our inner peace, where life's challenges are no longer obstacles but opportunities to grow and expand. The love that emanates from our essence is not conditioned by external factors. It is constant, unshakable, and manifests in all aspects of our life, creating a continuous cycle of transformation. This state of being allows us to transcend the limitations of our psyche and live authentically, fully, and in harmony with the universe. Emotional dependency arises when we place our happiness and well-being in the hands of others. This relentless pursuit of external validation prevents us from recognizing that the true source of happiness resides within ourselves. Delegating our happiness to others means leaving our emotional life in the hands of factors we cannot control. When we seek happiness only outside ourselves, we become vulnerable to the fluctuations of relationships and external circumstances. True emotional liberation comes from understanding that happiness is an internal choice, which does not depend on others' actions or approvals, but on our ability to be complete and full on our own. Solitude, often viewed as something to be feared, becomes a space for self-care and self-discovery when we understand that we can be our own source of love and joy. When we free ourselves from emotional dependency, solitude is no longer a burden, but an invitation to connect with our own essence. We begin to see solitude as a precious time for healing, reflection, and growth, where we can nourish ourselves internally and develop a deeper relationship with ourselves. This process strengthens us and prepares us to relate to others in a healthier and more balanced way, as our happiness no longer depends on external approval or company. As we advance on the path of emotional liberation, self-respect becomes the foundation for all our interactions and relationships. When we establish healthy boundaries and practice self-care, we send a clear message to the world. I respect myself and am worthy of being treated with dignity and love. This self-respect creates an energy that attracts respect from others and allows us to establish relationships based on reciprocity and balance. From this point on, emotional dependency disappears as we are able to give and receive love in a healthy and conscious manner, without needing to seek completeness outside ourselves. The awakening of consciousness is a transformative process that completely changes how we perceive love and relationships. When we begin to see ourselves more deeply and authentically, we become more aware of what we truly desire and deserve. This awakening allows us to break old and limiting patterns and opens us up to new possibilities. Love, which may have once been seen as something coming from outside, becomes an internal experience, flowing naturally from within. From this point on, relationships become more meaningful, based on true connection and mutual respect, and no longer on dependency or lack. As we value ourselves, our perception of reality changes profoundly. When we understand and recognize our intrinsic value, our vibrational energy changes, and this attracts people and opportunities more aligned with our essence. Self-love then becomes a transformative force that not only heals emotional wounds but also expands the horizons of our life. The connections around us become healthier, more authentic, and balanced. Because as we begin to see ourselves with more clarity and appreciation, we also invite the world to treat us in the same way. The simple act of valuing ourselves reflects in all areas of our life, creating a reality where relationships and opportunities expand and become more prosperous. However, self-love is not a final destination but a continuous path of evolution. The process of loving oneself unfolds throughout life, always growing and transforming. The journey of self-love is a daily practice, a commitment to our own evolution and well-being. Along this journey, we will face challenges, but we will also discover new layers of ourselves, making us more whole and aligned with our true essence. This continuous practice of self-love creates a new reality where we are the creators of our own experience, and each step taken towards self-awareness and personal acceptance opens new doors to love, growth, and a full life. Now that you've discovered how to stop waiting for love from others and become your own miracle, it's time to put this knowledge into practice. What will you do today to love yourself more and stop seeking external validation? What holds you back from taking control of your own happiness? Share your answers in the comments and share your experience. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any videos on transforming your life. And to continue this journey, click on the video that appears here in the card or in the description. Let's go through this transformation together.